All right. So we have 3 more lessons left, which is not much. I think usually I must spend a week on what I just did on Monday, and then maybe a week on what I'm going to do today. This is 7, 8, 9, 10. Is this week 7? Are we in week 7? We got started later. I think everybody else is in week 8.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think so. Still work. All right. Tell me tell me how you feel. So I can actually, I'm prepared to go over stops. Or we can do some review. Or we can review next week. Let's review next week. I'm going to do stops. And then next week, I think I'm going to take a look at everything timing-wise to just make sure we're clear. Then we may have a review week next week before I do the last few rules, only because it's not that many more rules, inshallah. I think we'll do that. Let's see now. All right, I think you see my screen. Let's get recording.
Recording in progress.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. All right. So today, inshallah, we're going to go over our stopping rules. And for the most part, we're going to talk about the rules for stopping. But for the most part, I want you all to remember the symbols and then the general idea. Some of this you won't be able to implement because it's not like we're reading the Quran and we understand everything that we're saying in Arabic. So because of that, then we'll have to... we're going to really rely on the stopping symbols a lot of times. And then, of course, the more grammar everybody takes and the more you start to understand what you're reading, then you can apply the rules in a much clearer and firmer fashion. But for now, we're going to understand the rules and then really understand the symbols, right, and what they represent, inshallah. Before we get started, are there any questions from our session on Monday after you all looked back or didn't look back? Who can tell me what did we discuss on Monday? Which rule was it?
I know we talked about the idgham mutajanis, which are the letters that have the same makhraj but they have a different sifah.
Very good.
And I think there's a shed that's going to be on the second letter.
Exactly.
And, well, that's just I remember. And then the first one is muta. I know it means is mutakarib. I'm not sure.
So the first one we did was mutamathil.
Okay, so that one. Well, that one, they had the same makhraj and they had, I know that the sifah was, no, it was the two same letters. The letters were the same and a shadda went on the second one and you blended into the second one. So that was the mutamalis, I don't know if I'm saying it right.
Mutamathil.
A mutamathil. And then we did the mutajanis. That was one that I just said. And then, I don't know what the other one is. I know it's Mutakari,
Mm-hmm.
Cardi, and they were the ones with the exit points or something where, I don't know.
Well, those were the ones that either their sifats are similar or their exits are similar.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And this is where we had rules for lam and ra, as well as qaf and kaf.
Okay, so yeah.
Right? Lam and ra and qaf and kaf. All right, very good. Excellent. That was very good, right? And so those were all the rules for blending idgham. And remember, all idghams are going to have the reference of a shadda on the second letter, because that's what the blending is. The blending is, in order to blend, you're going to use the shadda, right? So that rule is saying the first letter that had the sukoon is going to be blended into the second letter with the vowel mark by placing a shadda on the second letter, right? So every instance of idgham, you have a letter that has a sukoon before, and after it, you're going to blend into the letter that comes after it. And so this is what was happening when we had two letters that were side by side, a kaf with sukoon followed by a kaf with the vowel, right? We're going to skip the kaf with sukoon, put a shadda on the kaf with the vowel, and we're going to articulate it just like shadda. All right? Very good. There was one instance where we did not have a complete idgham, meaning that you didn't completely have the shadda there. Who remembers what letters, what two letters that we did not have a complete idgham, and we actually had to give the first letter with the sukoon in the sukoon of the shadda, and then we came out with the second letter with the vowel out of the shadda? Who remembers? It was a heavy letter to light letter. Heavy letter to light letter. Nobody? It was the ta to dal, right? And ta to ta, right? Okay. So if we have a ta is the first letter, and the second letter with the vowel is going to be the dal or the ta, because ta, ta, and dal all exit from the same point, right? Tip of the tongue up to the soft palate, dal, dal, right? If that happens, we're going to keep the heaviness of the ta in the shadda, right? How? And then when we come away, we're going to come away with the lighter letter, ta, right? Belt, ta. Belt, ta. All right, you guys remember that one? Kind of, sort of? All right. All right, so today we're going to go over al-waqif wa al-ibtida, meaning the stopping and the starting, right? So anytime we read in the Quran, the Arabi is actually connected by our breath, not necessarily by our sound, right? Because sometimes we have stoppages like these, what you call guttural stops, and you go neat, right? That's a Hamza sakin at, right? And you have, even when I say abid, right? That's a bat with the sukoon abid. My sound doesn't keep going because I stop it on that bad abid. But my the connection is through the breath of my air, right? Meaning that you're considered keeping reading as long as you're not taking a breath in, right? Or pausing too long, right? So that's the process, is that the Arabi is connected by your breath, right? It's connected by your breath. So when you have to start or stop, these are going to be places where you're literally starting or stopping and you're breathing in between, right? So that's why sometimes when you all are reading it, and the instruction is you can't just take any breaths all you want to, right? You can't just read and be like, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, right? Those are all considered stops, right? Every time you do that, you take a breath in, that's actually considered a stop, right? So this particular lesson, we're going to learn what are some of the best stops, right? Meaning what ideally you want to do at a stop, or where you want to stop and where you don't want to stop, right? And then just talking about really the different types of stop, right? So there are 3 categories for stopping. These categories really just help you to see why a person would stop. Okay, so why a person would stop. Don't think of these as different types of stops, just understand these as why these are categories of why people would stop. So people stop when they're being tested or for information. So anytime you're reading with myself or Rashida or anyone, and we're stopping you, nope, you didn't say that properly. Nope. Well, let me explain how you do this shadda. Let me explain how you do this ikhfa. Those are all considered informative or test stops, right? Because that's literally what you're doing. You're not stopping because even if you were out of breath, that's not why you're stopping. You're stopping to receive instruction, right? To get information. And it's not going to be bound by the stopping rules, right? Sometimes I stop you all mid articulation. And so when I do that, just know that it's not because you don't have to say, oh, well, let me go back or let me do this. Well, it's not really going to fall into those categories. It truly is because I'm going to tell you to go back here, start here, do this. So it's not bound by some of what we're going to talk about later because it truly is for information, right? You had an error, so we actually are trying to correct an error. Or we're practicing how to articulate something in particular, okay? So that's our first idea of why a person would stop. The second is going to be a forced or unplanned stop, right? Forced or unplanned stops are really when it's not voluntary, right? Whether it's shortness of breath, you may sneeze, right? Cough, right? All of those, that's not really a planned stop. You didn't choose to stop there. You're not wanting to stop there. And when you stop there, unless it requires returning to a few words, that the reader really just kind of starts wherever they just stopped at, right? But ideally, this forced or unplanned stop is not. We want to avoid these. Which is why we're going to go to the optional stop. So sometimes you all are running out of breath. It's not intentional, right? So then you just really just kind of go back and start over sometimes, or start where you just ran out of breath at, and then you keep reading. But what we're going to work on is the last stop, right? The last category, which are optional stops. And this is where you're planning to stop, right? This is where you're actually saying, okay, I'm going to stop here. I'm going to read this way. And this is where you all should be right now when you're reading. So if you're reading something and you can't give the whole length of that ayat inside of your recitation, then that means that you want to place a stop, right? You literally want to say, okay, I think I want to stop here. I want to stop there. And this is what I can do in my one breath. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to repeat. I'm going to start here and I repeat and then I go there. You all should have those inside of your pages that you are practicing. You should have stops marked, right? You should say, this is my stop and this is where I'm going to repeat. This is my stop and this is where I'm going to repeat. If you're reading things in the ayat are not that long, you may not need a stop. You may not need to place a stop, right? Or if you're using the stops that are already given, right, according to the printers of the mushaf, and they've given those little stopping symbols. If you're using those stopping symbols, then you may not have to place your own stops, right? As long as you can make it in one breath. How many of you all are reading according to breath right now? Is everybody reading according to their breath? Are you actually conscious of when you breathe in and or not?
Yes.
Not me.
You're breathing all over the places, Zakia?
Yes, every word, every letter. I need to stop, but I need to try.
All right, very good. Nicole, are you breathing properly, or what are you doing?
I'm working on it.
Yes, I agree with you. So I know what you. Okay, so very good. So what I usually do is once we start covering the stopping rules, then that's when I usually start to enforce the breath, right? And it really depends on the reader. So if you are having difficulty in other places that really make it a little even more difficult for you to practice breathing properly and stopping as you should, then we'll hold off, right? So if you're still working on counts and different things like that, then we'll hold off. However, Sister Zakia, I don't think that's your case. So I will make a make a note to Rashida and let her know starting next week that you would have gone over stops, right? And the idea of stops and reading in one breath. So I will encourage her to kind of push the envelope a little bit for you. It really forces you to mark stops and then strive to read in one breath, right? What you'll find when you start to do that is that the reading will become smoother,
Yes.
right? It takes
Yes.
a little bit of effort, but
Yes.
that's where you gain the
does.
sound of the Quran that you're
Right.
familiar with,
Right.
right? That you listen to a reciter
Right.
and you say, oh, it sounds like this.
Mhm.
Well, that's when you force yourself to read in one breath, that's when the rhythm of the Quran really starts to come out,
Mhm.
okay? As long as you're taking breaths in between and you're kind of stopping and pausing all over the place, you can't really get the full rhythm, right? Because you keep breaking
Right,
it up.
because you keep breaking
okay?
it up.
So that's the goal in identifying the stops, and you have to practice this is for us to gain that fluency in the way that we read, inshallah. So let's look at the optional stops, right? Because this is really where the rules come into play. They're called al-waqf al-ikhtiyari, right? Al-waqf al-ikhtiyari. All right, so these are optional stops. There are 4 categories of the optional stops. Stops that are tamun, right, which means that they're complete. That's the red dot over to the left. Tamun stops are complete stops, and we're going to discuss that here in a second. Kaf1 stops are sufficient stops. Man, this is a sufficient stop. Hasan stops are good stops, right? And then Qabih are unacceptable stops. These are places we don't want to stop at, okay? Our Tab1 stops are complete stops. This is when a person stops and the place that they stop at, the grammar is not connected and the meaning is not connected, okay? So what you're going to find when we start talking about where people should stop at is that it really is going to be based in grammar and meaning, right? That's what's going to dictate whether or not you need to go back and repeat, or if you don't need to go back and repeat. For most of us, we don't understand all of the grammar, nor do we understand the meaning. Right? So, although I'm giving these to you, I give this because we really want our Tajweed course to be a complete course. I wouldn't want you to go somewhere else and study Tajweed, which you may know that one class in Tajweed is never enough, which is why we do the rules review, is because the first time you took it, you understand something. The second time you take it, you understand more. By the third time, you actually might, get it. And you're like, oh, that's that rule. I know that rule now. So it does take a few times, actually, of going through Tajweed rules. It's not like something you do once and then you just have it. You do it, and then you practice it a lot. And then you come back and you do the rules again, and then you understand the rules a lot better because you would have been actually implementing a lot of those rules, and it just makes more sense, okay? So if you go somewhere else and you take a Tajweed course, I want you to at least be familiar with the idea of stops and that they have categories and what those categories represent. So the complete stop is based in complete grammar, complete meaning. Meaning what you start to read after you stop has absolutely no connections grammatically and no connections in meaning, okay? And then these are just a few indicators to help you to know when that may happen. So let's say you were reading and you got to the end of a story. Well, the next part that you start reading, it has no connection to the story in grammar and in meaning, right? So it's a good stop. It's a complete stop, meaning there's no need to go back and repeat anything. It is absolutely complete, right? It says before a negative command. Not sure if you would know what a negative command is, but if you can recognize your command verbs and a negation of that command verb, then know that that is oftentimes a spot where it is complete, because that negative command is coming with a new, right, grammatical structure. Before a question, right? So if you see a hamza of question, that would be a good place if you can recognize that hamza of question, or if you can recognize, I think they're called harful istifham. So that's like the particles of questioning, right? So there are different particles like hal that asks a question, like how are you? Kam is like how many, right? Men, right, is asking who, right? So these are all particles that if you see them, then they're oftentimes asking a question. Hal is asking a question. Cam is asking a question. Maybe not man so much. It can be a question, or it can be within a statement. So you'd really have to know if it was asking a question or not. Before a yeah of addressing someone, right? So yeah, amanu. That might not be connected grammatically, right? Because it's starting off. Allah is starting off to address this group of people. So what came before that really may not is not connected grammatically, definitely, and then in meaning wise, it's not connected. Not to say that it can't be related, right? Not to say that it can't be related, but it's not connected in its meaning. And then it says separation between punishment and mercy. Not sure about that one always, but the others, inshallah. But so those are just helpers, right? Those are just helpers. But once again, we're going to use the symbols, and that's going to be the best thing for us. Sufficient stops are saying that these are sufficient because the meaning is complete, and what follows the meaning, but not in grammar, right? So the word is related into what follows it in meaning, but not in grammar. And these are acceptable stops, and you don't have to repeat on these stops. So the meaning is complete, and the word that is after it is related to it in its meaning, but not in its grammar. So the grammar and the meaning are complete, but it's just a little bit related to it in meaning. So the one that came before, when we said it was a complete stop, a tam one stop, the meaning that comes after is not going to be related, right? So I think I said that incorrectly. So it's not going to be related, because if it is going to be related in meaning, it's like it's a sufficient stop. You still don't have to repeat anything, but the meaning still has some connection to what came before. But the grammar and the meaning are still complete. It's just related to it. So for instance, let's say Allah was talking in the Quran, and it was saying something about the believers, and the grammar was complete, like the statement that was given is grammatically complete, and even the statement that was given is complete in its structure. It's like you understand it. No, it's not. But then Allah goes on and talks something about something else about the believers. Well, it's related to what came before, but they really can stand off by itself, or it can be related. You can keep going because it is related. So that would be a calf one stop. That is going to be a sufficient stop. A lot of these stops where you see the little gene, those are sufficient stops, right? So a lot of those are sufficient stops sometimes, because what you'll find is that the grammar and the meaning is complete. Sometimes though, you look at it, you're like, oh, but it's still related, right? It's still related. And so that's where you find situations like that with that particular gene stop.
That's in there.
I'm sorry, are there any questions so far?
No.
Like, all right.
No.
The Kafun stop, the Hassan stop. Now, this is where when you stop, the meaning is complete, but it is tied to what follows it in meaning and in grammar, right? And what we mean by the meaning is complete, meaning that, you understood where I stopped at, like the sentence. It may have been the end of like this. It may have been the end of the prepositional statement, right? It may have been the end of that idea, but the rest of the meaning and the grammar is still connected. Like, so if I start reading again, you're like, oh, but no, this is still all related, right? And yeah, it was a good stop because it was the end of an idea, but that idea is still related to what comes after, and the bigger grammatical structure is still related. So you know how sometimes you can have a whole sentence that is a predicate, right? You can have a whole sentence that is a predicate. Well, that means that what came before is complete, but the whole sentence that comes after is still connected to it. And so that's what we mean by these particular stops, they're hasan, they're good stops because what you were reading, you stopped at a good point, it was complete. But what comes after still is connected in meaning and grammar. And so when we stop at these particular stops, it's going to be necessary. It's going to be necessary to go back and repeat a little bit of what you said before, because you want to make sure that the listener knows that these things are connected, right? So you're going to go back and repeat on a hasan stop. And it's good because you didn't stop in the middle of a meaning, right? Or in the middle of a word, for instance, which we sometimes do when we can't identify where the word ends. Sometimes it happens. Or even splitting up certain things. And I'll try to show you guys some things to help you to say, oh, okay, this is good. Once you start going, though, and many of you are at that point, you start to feel the Quran, and you feel like, oh, like you start to understand just basic structure. So you feel like, oh, no, this is a good place to stop it, right? Like you can feel it, like, oh, this is a good place to stop it. Even though you may have to repeat, you know that, okay, this is still a good place. So that's fine. When you stop at those, you still have to go back. So the first two, we didn't have to go back and repeat anything because the meaning and the grammar were complete. Even though they may have been related, it still was complete. And this, although the meaning is complete and it is still connected by grammar and meaning, then there's no way that you can't go back. You have to go back, okay? And then our last one are unacceptable stops. So these are places where we actually don't want to stop at because we create incomplete meanings. Sometimes the meanings that are incomplete, they also create incorrect connotations in the Quran. So for instance, it says, if you stop in a manner that would contribute something to Allah that's not true, right? Splitting up, there is no God except Allah. So if you just stop that, there is no God, right? You don't want to stop there, right? And so that's what you mean by these are unacceptable stops, right? These are unacceptable stops. And so I want to make sure it's clear. You all remember when we first started, we said that there are these reasons for stopping. One of the reasons to be tested, right? So we're not holding ourselves to these rules of stopping when we're being tested, right? I might stop you in the middle of a word, right?
Right.
So that's not, it doesn't follow the same rules because you're learning. It's a process of learning. It's not intentional. You're not trying to create anything, and nobody's listening to you to see if you, because your whole stopping has nothing to do with intentional stopping and meaning or anything like that. It truly is to be tested. So this doesn't apply. These categories doesn't apply. Also, remember the other reason that you stopped is that it was an unintentional or unplanned stop. For instance, your breath, your breathing, you ran out of breath. So once again, don't hold yourself to these rules again when you accidentally stop because you ran out of breath and say, oh, but I stopped and I didn't do, no, like calm yourself down. Yes, you may have given incorrect meaning or did that, but it was unintentional. And so you're always going to be going back and to actually strive to read through in the one breath. Right? So it doesn't follow the same rulings. These rulings are when these stops are intentional. You're actually trying to stop, right? You're wanting to stop. This is where you're very conscious of where you stop it. Okay? You're very conscious of where you stop it, not wanting to create any incorrect meaning. Even when you run out of breath, you're still striving to get to a spot where it's a good stop, which is why you have to plan the stops at our stage right now of reading, because we don't necessarily have command of our breath to just read, and then stop at a good stop, naturally, right? Once you begin reading, and your reading is really fluid, then you can, I don't plan stops. I just read until I run out of breath, right? And then I just know when I start to run out of breath, I'm looking to see where's my best stop. You see what I'm saying? So, and that you'll be able to do, inshallah. All right. Are there any questions there before we review our stopping symbols?
So in at this point, I think I should know this by now, but when we're going over what we have to read in terms of creating the stuff, so you don't necessarily have to know the meaning, but for example, like I would have to go to like Search Truth or Quran.com to know where to stop, because I don't necessarily know sometimes the complete word or where it begins or where it ends. It breaks it up in the if I'm looking at it on one of those pages. So like knowing where to stop without knowing the meaning, I guess I'll have to look at the transliteration and then create a stop in that way. Is that how we create in the stops?
Yeah, so I'm gonna share my screen here. So
Okay, that's good.
So this is Quran.com, right?
Okay.
This is probably one of the most useful views for you all at your stage, right? It really, for anybody reading that is not understanding the Quranic Arabic, one, it really kind of breaks up the words in a way and gives you meaning, so you can really see like what you're saying when you're saying it, right?
All you when it's over.
And the manner is separated now. So when we took off the inline, because this is the display that you change the display to show it that it's the translation is in line with the Arabic. So when it's not, you can kind of see the separation, right? So let's see here. You can kind of see the separation. So so you can see here. This is wa la adabu, right? You can see wa. If you know wow is a word, wa minan nasu. So you start to know words just kind of looking, right? You kind of start to know. Still can fool you sometimes, right? You're like, oh, I thought that was the end. So you start to know. But when you change to this inline view, it makes it really clear, right? It's like you know exactly where the words are ending, and so this is useful. And it's still in this page format, right? It's still in that, because we assign pages, right? So you're still in your page format, and then on top of that, you put the English right underneath. So now as you're reading, let's say you decide you want to make a stop, you can actually glance at the meaning as well and see, is this a good stop meaning wise?
Based on the rules.
Exactly. Okay. So this is by far, to me, one of the most useful ones. And so for the most part, you're okay with stopping at almost any word, right? Because in your case, you're going to be repeating anyway, right? So we're not stopping in the middle. Be careful of stopping at negations, right? And so, like, this is a negation, lam tundirhum, right? Not, or not warn them, right? I was like, warn them? I was like, oh yeah. And you not warn them, right? Or you not warn them, and they won't believe. La, right? And so sometimes we will say la, right? But it really is better to give the negation and the verb that it's negating together, right? La, right? So if you were to stop, you would stop at maybe the M instead of the lam. Or if you're going to read through, stop at the tundirhum versus just the lam, tundirhum. But yeah, so I think this is really helpful though. But most of the time you all are going to be repeating, so you're really okay unless you find yourself trying to stop at something. If you look at it, it creates a really poor meaning. Let's see. All right. So on our stopping, so if you're using Uthmani script of the Quran, these symbols, the symbols that are in there are going to be the symbols in this chart. These are all of the symbols that you're going to find in the Uthmani script. I give a little bit more than just what you find in Uthmani, just because sometimes you all use that Majidi script. Some people do. So I try to give the symbols that you might find in there as well. Most of the symbols, a lot of the symbols, they go back and forth. You see them in both scripts. Just the Majidi script just has a few more symbols than the Uthmani script does. And so that's why, and because they have just a few more subtleties to the rulings. And once again, these are rulings. These are academic rulings. So think about rules in what am I trying to say? So think about if you say, if a person should read the Quran while they're on their cycle. That is a fiqh ruling, right? That's not a hard and fast, right? The reason it's a fiqh ruling, because there's evidence to support this or that, right? And so someone's scholarly has looked at this and looked at that, and then they say, okay, this is the ruling. Well, these stops are of that nature, okay? The stops are rulings. These are not fast and hard and fast rules that can't be deviated from. That's not the case. These are actually rulings. These are people who study. These are Tajweed scholars and Quran scholars that have said, this is the best place. I've never heard any of these being the case where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he stopped here. You see what I'm saying? What you find is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he made sajda at this point. Well, they all have the same sajda points. No Quran has different sajda points. Okay, so things that Rasulullah did as it relates to Quran, you find them codified across all scholars. That's not the issue. Things like these stops, though, these are, as you read the Quran, that you would say, wow, this meaning here is better if you do this. This meaning here is better if you do this. And so this is where these have come up at. Although I will say the 3-dot one, and I would have to go and find out. I don't know if I can, but the ones we'll look at when it has the 3 dots and you have to stop at either or of those stops, then that particular stop, it literally, there is a different meaning if you stop at one or the other, right? Which is why they say don't read through both of them. I mean, so I would believe that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he would have stopped at one or the other, right? For that purpose, for that meaning purpose. So let's take a look. So our meme stop. So anytime you see a little meme, right, over a word, that is going to be a compulsory stop, right? This is waqf lazim. It's saying that you have to stop here.
Lisa, I'm sorry. Are you supposed to be sharing your screen? I'm not seeing anything.
You don't see anything? Does anybody else see anything?
I see session 7 rules review for Tajweed, but that's all I see.
We don't have the PowerPoints by itself.
You see what?
She said PowerPoint's over to the left, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah, the PowerPoints are on the side. I was going to ask the same question. It's just not on the main screen.
I see you looking at something, and I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not seeing anything.
And use reshare and see if that solves
Okay.
it.
Then the last one you talked about, we didn't see it, but we can print it, I
You all
guess.
see it now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes,
Partial
thank
stopping?
you.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Oh,
To
God,
me?
how could that? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I don't know. That's what I had clicked before. I don't know why it wasn't registering. All right. Alhamdulillah. Thank you. All right. So the meme stop is our compulsory stop. Waqf lazim, right? Waqf lazim. And this stop is actually necessary, right? That you stop. And it's because that there is meaning that will change dramatically if you were to keep going, right? So usually when you have this particular stop, it's because if you were to keep reading through the stop, it's going to change the meaning quite a bit. And that's what you don't want, right? You don't want to change the meaning according to not stopping at that particular place. All right. The ta stop is what's called the absolute pause. This one you're not going to find in the Uthmani script, but you will find it in the Majidi script. And this is a stop sign that indicates to the reader to take a gap in reciting the passage by taking a breath and discontinue the recitation for an instantaneous period of time. It is better to stop here because it makes the reading process easier by fully grabbing the meaning of already read text. This absolute pause here, I would believe, because this is one, it's in essence a stop, right? It's telling you to take a breath so the meaning can soak in. This pause, or what's called the absolute pause, in the Uthmani script, I'm pretty sure it's just listed as a Jim stop, right, or something. It's using just a different stop because there's no need to give it a different stopping rule. But you will find it in the Majidi script, not in Uthmani, right? Not in the scripts that we read in for the most part. The Jim stop, this is a permissible stop. It's called Waqf Jaiz. Jaiz means it's permissible, meaning you can do it or you cannot do it, right? This is one that you see a lot, right? We'll see this one a lot. It points towards the completion of a matter discussed in that fragment of the ayat. So one needs to stop here. Although it is not obligatory to do so, you can absorb the meaning discussed in the previous part and get ready to know about new information following in the same verse. So once again, this Jim stop is oftentimes that half one stop. It is a sufficient stop where the meaning is complete, right? The grammar is complete, but sometimes the meaning that comes after is related, right? And so this is really a good stop. You can keep reading or you cannot. And the reason you can keep reading or not is because sometimes the relationship, you'll see the relationship in what you're reading. And so it's okay if you keep reading. It doesn't create any problems for the meaning. It doesn't create any problems for understanding because the relationship to what is coming after it. However, it's also okay if you stop here because what you just read is actually complete in its meaning and in its grammar structure. Okay? So the Jim stop is going to be the stop that you say continue or don't. Either way is fine. All right? And really, we train people to use the Jim stops. Go ahead and use them. Unless once your breath starts to improve and you don't have to use them so much, especially sometimes you'll see Jim stops come fairly quickly. And if your reading has gotten, your breath has gotten fluid and you can read, well, it's not necessary to stop at all of them if you want to keep going. All right? The stop is saying it's better not to stop here. This is Kila. Particular stop, you're not going to see this one in the Uthmani script as well. So this one you'll mostly find in the Majidi script. And it's just saying it's better not to stop, right? It's better not to stop here. And once again, it says that there are differing opinions. I cannot say enough that these stopping rules have different opinions to them, which is why I prefaced the conversation before that these are rulings. These are rulings and so you will find differences in some of the rulings. The next one is our saw. So this is the one called Yasul. This is a permissive pause. It specifies the permission of continuing reading, although one should stop here. Once again, I don't know how this. So the license pause right under it, that is the sod. This is the symbol. This symbol here, sod lam with the little the second symbol in this chart. This is the one that says it permits the reader to take a breath in case they're getting tired, right? This is this licensed stop or pause. It's okay if you stop here, but it really is better that you keep going, right? So if you need breath, that's fine. Go ahead and stop here. But for the purpose of what is really being read and its full meaning, it actually is better if you keep going. But it still is okay if you stop, right? It's okay if you stop. It's the same thing for the off here. The permissible pause that has the sod and the lamb. This is more online with the fourth one, or the orange one, that says it's actually better to stop here, although you can continue reading, right? It really is better to stop here. For the meaning purposes, it's better to stop here, but you can keep reading, right? But you can keep reading. And then the 3 dots, when you find the 3 embracing dots, they're called mu'ayniqa, right? These 3 little dots, you'll find one set of 3 dots, and then later you'll find the other set of 3 dots that are, somewhat close together. Here, you want to stop at one or the other, but not both, right? So you want to stop at one or the other, but not both. And once again, it is for meaning. And we'll take a look how it literally changes meaning. If you stop at one or if you stop at the other one. The la is telling you do not stop here, right? The last symbol is telling you do not stop here. Keep reading, because if you stop here, it's going to create a certain meaning that you don't want. So if you find yourself running out of breath and you stop at that la, what I always tell people is just go back and repeat a little bit and just read through it. It's not like, it's not so serious that it's like, oh my God, I stopped there, what's going to happen? That's not it. Just go back. The idea is that you don't want to stop because you're trying to make sure the meaning is connecting. Well, it's okay. Go back and repeat a little bit and then read through the stop and connect to what comes after. Even if you read through and you connect and you stop, it's okay to start at the place right after the la, because you've already connected them. Okay, you've already connected the meanings. Alrighty. Set the latif, we'll look at that separately. So let's look at this chart really quickly here. I'm going to pull up a different chart here. Right, so this is what the symbols look like that we'll deal with, right, the most, right? So our meme and our 3 dots, right? These are our stops. These are things that you absolutely have to stop at. You have to stop at them. On the 3 dots, you have to stop at one or the other, but you can't stop at both. One or the other, but you can't stop at both. If you stop at the first one, then you don't stop at the second one. If you stop at the second one, then you cannot stop at the first one. Okay? Right underneath it are going to be those that are in the middle. Stop or continue. You have choices in these. The off, right? That one is saying it's actually better to stop. Although in theory you can continue. I've never heard reciters not stop here, right? So for most of the reciters that I listen to, they almost always stop at the qaf stops, okay? The Jim is saying stop or continue, it doesn't really matter. It's up to you, right? Stop or continue, it doesn't matter. We'll be using all of our stops though. Saad Lam is telling you it's actually better to continue. It's better that you keep reading. However, if you have to stop, it's okay. And once again, we'll still use those. We'll use those stops. The very last one, La, is telling you don't stop, keep going. Don't stop, keep going. And so you see these are highlighted in red, yellow, and green, like kind of letting you know like a stoplight, right? Stop, yield, kind of up to you, go, don't go. And then the green is go, 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 don't stop. All right. So let's go to a page in the Mus'haf here. Try to take it off of this view. Why can't I get to my settings? Oh, there it is. All right. So at the beginning of Baqarah, we have an example of the three dots, right? The mu'anniqa is what they're called, these three embracing dots, so to speak. If we were to read this and we stop at the first dot, it says, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. It says, Dhalikal kitabu la raib. Right? So if I come here and I say Dhalika, that is al